Hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Jason Heath. I'm the Managing Director of Objective Financial Partners, and I am your host today for the Objective Financial Hour. Today we have with us Karen Henderson, who is the founder of the Long-Term Care Planning Network, or LTC Planning Network. She is an expert in long-term care issues and long-term care solutions, and we're going to talk a little bit about both today. As a financial planner, I end up in a lot of conversations with people about a number of different topics, but one of the things that I find gets probably the least amount of attention until perhaps it's too late is the issue of long-term care, health problems in retirement or at any stage of the game for that matter. And again, we have with us here today, Karen.
Thank you.
So Karen, thank you very much for being here. And I guess maybe one thing I'd like to do is actually start at the start. I was very interested in how you got into this industry in the first place and what led you to be here. I think it's very important to know about someone's past and how they got to a certain place. And in your case, I think it speaks that much more to what it is you're doing. So how did you come to found the Long-Term Care Planning Network in the first place?
Well, as often happens, a personal experience will drive what you end up doing with your life. And I had done many wonderful things during my career, you know, worked for the airlines, worked for the government, traveled all over the world. But when my father was diagnosed with vascular dementia, and I started to look around to try and figure out, first of all, what was going on with the disease, and then what could I do for him, I realized, and this was back in '96, that there wasn't very much out there to help me. And so that 1996 marked the beginning of a 14-year dementia care experience with my father. He died in 2000. And during that time, I set up Caregiver Network and How to Care, and now the Long-Term Care Planning Network, because I was absolutely driven to do it. It took over my life. It gave me a way to give back to my dad and to, since 1996, give back to thousands of people literally around the world through my experience and my writings and my research. So it's my passion. I found it through a tough experience, but I couldn't be happier doing what I'm doing.
Well, I think that's great. I think it's an issue and a topic that people need to know about. And certainly my experience in the past has been such that people tend to find out about long-term care by experience, and typically it's an experience of their own. It's actually having to go through the process of caring for somebody who has some sort of a health problem or a health issue, and people tend to be a lot more reactive than proactive.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that we're at a very crucial point right now, certainly within Canada and across the world for that matter, just as far as our demographics. Such a large proportion of the population, the baby boomers, is approaching that age and stage where long-term care starts to become a concern and a reality. So I was hoping maybe first and foremost you could shed a little bit of light on what should people be thinking about, worrying about, looking into, questions they should be asking, whether it's somebody who is approaching retirement or maybe it's somebody who has elderly parents, and what are some of the things that they should be thinking about?
Well, the first thing that I tell anybody that I work with, whether it's a financial advisor and a client or whether it's a family that I'm consulting with, is that you really need to take action before something happens. Before a stroke, before a broken hip, before a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something similar. And I ask people to remember the 40-70 rule. So when mom and dad are about 40, and the kids are about 70, that's the time when you start to talk. And it's a conversation that's not going to happen once. It's a conversation that's going to happen over a period of time, at least in the ideal world. This is the way it should be. That you start out gradually, and then as circumstances change, as health issues change, you go deeper and deeper into the conversation. But all the time you're making plans. You're planning for the what ifs. You know, what if dad has a stroke and has to go into a facility, mom's on her own? What if I become a caregiver and I've got kids and a job, and how am I going to cope with that? So really what you want to do is manage the situation before it comes out of control. So be proactive and not reactive.
Okay. And so would you say that this 40-70 rule, would you say that it's something that when somebody's in a situation like that, a child or a parent, they should be initiating the discussion, involving other family members, siblings, potentially to sit down and talk about mom and dad, regardless of their health?
Yeah, regardless of their health, it's mom and dad's life that we're talking about. And what I always say is, how would you like it if someone was talking about your future and they didn't invite you to the party?
Yeah, behind your back.
Behind your back. And when my father was in the nursing home and he was had fairly advanced dementia, I insisted that he was at every meeting that I ever had with the staff. But to go back to your question, yes, family meetings are a great way to get everyone around the table who should be there. And if they can't physically be there, there can be a conference call so that the issues are discussed in a way that brings them forward and that solutions can be addressed. Now, sometimes there might be issues among the kids. Well, you know, I don't think you should do this and whatever. And perhaps that deserves a meeting among the children to try and work out their issues. But when it comes to presenting mom and dad with a plan, it should be a family plan. And one of the things that I've created is this little booklet called A Guide for Adult Children and Their Parents. It's never too late to start the conversation. And it talks about how to have a family meeting and the topics that you should discuss during this family meeting. And you need to make sure that when the first meeting is over, that you have a plan, that you will talk in 3 months or 6 months, and that the kids who couldn't be there will get email updates so that everybody knows what's happening.
That's great.
And nobody feels left out.
And so this is a resource that you've created for children of elderly parents, for seniors, for financial advisors that work with those people. You know, the interesting thing that I find is the funeral planning business seems to be a much bigger business. There's a lot more people out there, I think, that take the steps to make sure that their funeral is pre-planned and prepaid and taken care of. And I don't want to be presumptuous because I've never been involved directly myself in planning a funeral. But I would have to assume that all the work and time and effort involved around a long-term care issue that could last 10 years, 15, 20 years, I mean, who knows, is a much bigger issue than potentially a funeral, with no disrespect to anyone that's had to go through a tough time planning a funeral. But it gets so little attention, it seems.
Well, I think that our parents, I know that my parents planned their funerals, and they did it because they didn't want that to be a burden on their children. And by the same token, people should plan for long-term care, because I tell families that the greatest gift a parent can give their adult children is to tell those kids what they want at the end of life. We shouldn't have to guess what our parents want. They should tell us so that we can fulfill what they want. I often ask a question to adult children that I ask them to ask their parents. Mom, Dad, do I know everything that I need to know so that when the time comes, I know what you want me to do?
And so what would you say then are the three big concerns or issues that people should have? Is it related to money and finances and selling the house and stuff like that? Or is it more related to if a situation like this occurs, here's the type of care that I would like to have, or what is it?
Well, it's certainly money. When parents are ill or parents die, if there's going to be a fight about anything, it's going to be about money and stuff. So,
and when you say money, it's how to pay for the care,
no,
how much
it's how
to
much
pay?
money there is, and then how that money gets spent. And that's why it's very important that parents have powers of attorney for property, as well as powers of attorney for personal care, which is, called different things in different provinces. But everybody's keenly interested in how money gets spent in a family. And caregivers need to be able to demonstrate what they're spending on mom and dad and why. So money is always an issue. Another issue is, where are mom and dad going to live? Do they want to stay in their own home? Can they stay in their own home? Can the home be modified? Can a ramp be built up to the front door? Can stairways be widened to accommodate a wheelchair or a walker? Can they actually, if they've got a large home with a lot of staircases, can they live on one floor, which is the ideal situation? Because about 96% of people want to stay at home. They want to die at home.
Wow.
So there's ways to do it. Some are more expensive than others, but there has to be a will on the behalf of the family to make that happen. Because if a parent isn't safe at home, it can be dramatic. My father fell and broke a hip, but the reason he broke a hip is because he fell. And falls kill at least 5,000 seniors every year, and falls are one of the number one reasons that seniors end up in nursing homes. So security and safety in one's living environment is paramount.
It's something I think that people take for granted to a certain extent, and particularly younger people who may not be thinking about how difficult mobility can be.
Yes.
And it's very easy to have a fall in certain circumstances, where whether it's getting dizzy or being weak, or whatever the case may be. And
financial advisors need to be aware of that. So when everyone's client base is aging. And so you want to make sure that your office environment is comfortable for seniors. So the lighting is proper, the chairs are good with the proper armrests. There's things that can be done that are very inexpensive, but make an advisor appear that he really cares about his clients.
And I guess advisors aside, everybody really, it's something that business owners in general need to be more mindful of, more aware of, the people to whom they are catering. And I think these are very important things for everybody to be thinking about, to be aware of.
For everybody that has a business. I used to go to a dentist, and his office was up a flight of stairs that must have been about 45 degrees.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up moving because he knew that his clients couldn't cope with the stairs anymore.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a good start. We've started to identify some of the issues that people need to be aware of, regardless of whether they are parents or children or people advising those people. We've started to talk about some of the questions that people have been asking. We've started to talk about some of the resources that are available. We'll talk a little bit more about those, but you have certainly done a good job at the Long-Term Care Planning Network of putting together resources to help guide people in these conversations and decisions. So I think what we're going to do, Karen, is we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about a couple of more things, and hopefully everybody sticks around to learn more about long-term care and about Karen Henderson and the Long-Term Planning Network.
Animated by one supreme being, which is the God.
We don't do this in a sense of feminism, rather this is...
The interesting thing is that the political will seems to have come. You can find it only in Jews and Palestinians.
done a very good job at keeping it under control.
That liberating people who are thought to be unjust because of social, economic, or political conditions.
That time I thought it was so scary.
Officials
Everything you do.
When you know it, so you proxies of the
Vision 27 meeting together.
As if you can't wrong things and you slow.
Hello and welcome to Mensch Life. I'm David Grossman.
Welcome everybody to the Anna Adi Show.
Welcome to Passion Point. My name is Irene Becker.
Hi, I'm Sari Colt, and welcome to Chew on This.
Hi, I'm Gila Marto, and welcome to Gila and Guests.
welcome to Ladies with Wisdom.
Welcome to Sketch It Up.
I'm Susan Rideau.
Hi everybody, welcome back. I'm Jason Heath. I'm the Managing Director of Objective Financial Partners and the host of the Objective Financial Hour. We're here today talking about long-term care with Karen Henderson, who is the founder of the Long-Term Care Planning Network. In the last segment, we talked a little bit about some of the questions and concerns that people should have as it relates to long-term care planning. One of the things that I wanted to touch on a little bit now is some of the options that are available to people when they need long-term care and what some of the costs are, because I find it's a very elusive answer. I know that there's been times where I've tried to do a little bit of digging around and find information just for my own benefit or for that of clients, and have found that Google searches don't lead to a lot of good resources. And maybe part of it is just that the options and the costs are so diverse. And I don't know if maybe it takes having some sort of a long-term care issue and having to become part of the system to get answers. So maybe you can touch a little bit on what the resources, what the options are that are available for people, what the costs might be.
Well, if we're just looking at Canada, every province has its own terminology and its own way of spending money that comes from the federal government with respect to funding healthcare. But what most people don't understand is that long-term care, home care are not covered under the Canada Health Act. So when you're in the hospital and you need a needle or a bandage or whatever, that's covered because hospital care is covered. But when you are out and you're on your own, you're on your own. And it comes as a shock to people.
And so would that suggest then if somebody had a fall and they broke their hip, they would be admitted to the hospital, they would be treated for the fall and for the injury, then they would be released and would need to deal with things on their own?
Yes, yeah. They'd have to look at rehab and other things like that.
And I guess especially with the limited number of hospital beds that we hear are available, you know, I would assume that hospitals are fairly quick to usher people along to the extent they can.
Yeah, they right now we have thousands of seniors in hospital beds. It's called alternate level of care, or ALC. And it costs many more thousands of dollars per day to keep people in those beds than either to keep them in a nursing home or to keep them at home.
And is this in Ontario or Canada-wide? Canada-wide. So Canada-wide, and it might be...
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I think what people need to understand is what we call the continuum of care. And what that is it's the path that people follow from when they start to need care in their home, and then they need more, and they need more, and they need more. So as I said earlier, most people want to stay at home, and that's certainly possible. There is something that we call informal care, and unfortunately the vast majority of that falls upon family members. About 90% of care provided in the home to people who need it are provided by families, and of course it's provided free of charge, because the kids just jump in and do it. And the community around you also has resources. They have day programs, they have group eating programs, and these are of nominal charge.
I see. So they're partially funded by
Yes.
the provincial government?
Yeah, but there is a fee for you to access those things. So
Okay.
that's great for when you want to stay at home. When you need more care in the home, then you're going to fall upon the formal, calling upon the formal care system. And that means you need formal home care.
Mm-hmm.
And each province is the gatekeeper for access to subsidized home care and subsidized nursing home care.
Mm-hmm.
So it's up to that province to, let's say mom's at home and it's been determined that she needs help with her activities of daily living, and those are things like eating, dressing, bathing, continence, and mobility.
And that would be determined by mom's doctor?
Yes,
presumably?
and her family together, and hopefully even by mom. And so home care would be called in and she would be assessed and she would receive X number of hours per week provided by an agency. Now those hours are free of charge.
And those numbers are based, or those number of hours are based on her assessed need?
Her
based on
assessed need and also what is available in the system. And unfortunately, the vast majority of people's assessed needs are far greater than what the system is able to provide.
Sure.
We don't have enough money and we don't have enough caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to top up, and let's say the system is going to give you an hour a day or an hour every 2 days, and that's not enough, then you've got to go into your own pocket and pay for it.
And who would be providing those services? Would it be the same people that are coming in and providing the hour or two a day? You'd just be paying them directly for it?
You could use the same company, but there are also a lot of other home care companies that you can call upon. Now, the best thing, of course, is to have the same people come in because they get to know you, you
Sure.
get to know them, but that is often not the case. And when we're looking at costs, we're looking at $22, $23 an hour for what we call a personal support worker, who is someone who can help you with your bathing, eating, and dressing.
Mm-hmm.
And then that escalates to professional providers like physiotherapists, speech pathologists, nurses, and we're getting up $50, $60, $70, $80 an hour. So home care costs can escalate to $50,000, even $100,000 a year, depending on if it's 24/7 or what the needs are.
Wow. And I can imagine there's got to be cases out there where there just isn't or there are not the financial resources either from mom and dad or from the family to provide the right amount of care. So there's probably a lot of seniors out there who are receiving inadequate care, not by anyone's fault, but just there's only so many resources to go around, whether those are people or dollars.
That's right. There are thousands of seniors who are not receiving the care that they need. Now, when we're back now to the continuum of care, and if an individual, let's say you're 75, 80, and you're still pretty well, but you don't want to live at home anymore. The kids are gone, you're tired of snow and gardening and maintenance, and you have the alternative of moving along the path to a retirement home or assisted living. And this is a rental or tenancy situation where you rent the space. It may be a bedroom with an attached bathroom. It may be a full suite. It can be many different things. Your meals are provided, your laundry is done, there's activities, so it's a very nice way to live. And the rates for that are range from about $3,500 to $7,000, $8,000 a month. And there are a lot of...
And that's really based mostly on location, which city you're in?
It can be that, but a lot of retirement homes are being built today, and they're very high-end.
I see.
And I think that's unfortunate because we have many people who would like to access that level of accommodation, but haven't got $6,000, $7,000, or $8,000 to spend.
I see. And so what would be the difference then between a retirement home and a nursing home? Is there a difference?
Oh yes, and this is something that the vast majority of people don't understand. They use the terms interchangeably. A long-term care home or a nursing home or a home for the aged, that's all the same thing. And it's a facility that is mandated by the provincial government, legislated by the provincial government, but not necessarily owned by the government. So nursing homes can be owned by charities, they can be owned by religious groups, by ethnic groups, by cities, or by private corporations. But having said that, the rates are all the same in every one of these homes. In the province of Ontario, for example, so whether you live in Toronto or North Bay, you're going to pay the same amount of money for the same level of accommodation. So in a nursing home, we have ward level, which is about $1,600 a month. We have double occupancy, which is about $1,900 a month. And we have private rooms, which are about $2,200 a month.
And those would essentially be more like a hospital room, essentially, just a room with a bed and a chair and a closet, or I guess it depends.
Yeah.
There's a variety out there, or what?
The older facilities are pretty dismal.
Right.
They feel like hospitals.
I see.
Long corridors with small rooms and the same crummy colors on the walls and the same nursing stations. The newer facilities, however, are being built differently. They're all going to be either private or semi-private rooms. There's some homes still where you'll have 6, 7, and 8 people in a room. And that certainly isn't how I want to end my life. The other difference with retirement homes and nursing homes is that you can apply to a retirement home, and if you've got the money, you can get in. But you cannot just apply to a nursing home and get in. You've got to require 24/7 care and or supervision because of a cognitive impairment such as Alzheimer's disease. And within the province where you live, there are certain recommendations. You must have, in Ontario, an OHIP card. You must have lived here for 3 months, and so on and so on.
So if we could look at 2 different scenarios, I suppose. A worst case scenario, somebody doesn't own their home, they're renting an apartment, they don't have any savings, all they have is Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security, which doesn't amount to a heck of a lot. Maybe they've got, $1,500 a month of income that's coming in, and they have a cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's and need 24-hour-a-day care that starts at $1,600 a month, it sounds like. What happens if there's a shortfall?
Well, it's at this point in your life when you should be glad you live in Canada, because every province has it mandated that if you cannot afford ward-level accommodation, which is the cheapest, then the provincial government will look at your tax returns for a couple of years, determine that indeed you do not have the income to pay for ward-level accommodation. So they'll take what you have, your pensions, and you will have a bed in a nursing home, and you'll get what we call a comfort allowance of about $100 a month, and you can live out your life in a nursing home. Now, each province is slightly different, but the same principle applies.
So in theory, at least as of right now, everybody, regardless of their income and their assets and their means, is going to have access to a nursing home. At the very least, they may have to or have the ability to pay for something over and above. So worst case scenario, as of right now, people are going to be okay.
Well, not necessarily, because we don't have enough beds. And we've
Demand's increasing for those beds, I guess.
Huge,
supply?
Huge.
Is supply increasing? Are we having more beds and more facilities?
We did have more beds, but built in the last 20 years in Ontario and other provinces. But every province is facing a bed shortfall, every province. And the other issue that I want to address here is the issue of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. There was a report released in 2010 by the Alzheimer's Society of Canada that for me was a real eye-opener and should have been a real eye-opener for every person in this country. And that is that right now we have 500,000 Canadians with Alzheimer's or related dementia. We are diagnosing one case every 5 minutes.
Wow.
By 2038, we will have well over 1 million people. We will be diagnosing a case every 2 minutes. We don't know what causes Alzheimer's. We don't know how to prevent it. We've got drugs, Exelon, memantine, Aricept, which can slow the progression of the disease in some people, but it will not stop the disease. And right now in nursing homes across this country, the vast majority of people in nursing homes are over the age of 85 and have a cognitive impairment. And these people are the most difficult to care for because the behavior problems can be quite catastrophic, as has been indicated in newspapers.
Well, Karen, I think we're going to take a break right now. We've talked a little bit about some of the questions and concerns people should have as it relates to long-term care. We've talked about some of the resources that are available, some of the costs. We're going to talk about some of the proactive things you can do in the next segment, but first we're going to take a break. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. Hi everybody, my name is Jason Heath. I'm the Managing Director of Objective Financial Partners, and I'm your host here for the Objective Financial Hour. We're speaking today with Karen Henderson, who's the founder of the Long-Term Care Planning Network. We've been talking a little bit about long-term care issues in Canada. First and foremost, we talked a little bit about some of the questions that people should be asking, whether they are seniors or adult children with elderly parents. We've talked about some of the costs and some of the resources that are available on a reactive basis here in Canada. And I wanted to talk a little bit about proactive, how people can be proactive as it relates to long-term care. I mean, certainly somebody like yourself who has spent a long time in this industry and has spent and devoted a lot of your own resources to creating resources for the public, for financial advisors, I think that's a good starting point in terms of some of the ways that people can be proactive as it relates to long-term care. Can we talk a little bit about some of the resources that you've created? You've got some of them here with you. Presumably you've got access to some information on your website. What does somebody do if they want to be proactive about long-term care planning in Canada?
Well, the first thing that they need to do, and I'll integrate the resources into this, is that they need to understand the healthcare system where they live. And
when you say where they live, provincially is the main
that's right.
concern.
And you would be astounded when people contact me and they're looking for information, they're looking for help, they're looking for support, they're looking for care. The first question I ask was, well, have you contacted in Ontario your CCAC, for example?
And CCAC
is Community Care Access Centre, which is the gatekeeper for care. And they just sort of say, well, what's a CCAC? So they don't understand the system where they live. So knowledge is power, and that's the first thing that you need to do.
And CCAC is a government organization that provides information and resources to people within their province.
And care.
And care as well, they oversee.
So every province has their own version of a CCAC. It might be a district health council, but it's the same model, but with different terminology. So that's the first thing that people need to do. The next thing you need to understand is what the government does and does not provide. And I've mentioned that provincial governments do provide a basic amount of home care, and you have to understand how many hours you would get. I have mentioned that there is a co-payment in long-term care or nursing homes. You pay for the accommodation that you choose, whether it's ward, semi-private or private. The government pays for food and care, okay? So you don't get anything for nothing. in spite of the fact that the vast majority of Canadians think the government will look after them when the time comes. The government can't look after them. There is not enough money. They need to have resources of their own. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's something that makes me very angry, is that nobody steps up to the plate to educate Canadians. The government's not doing it. Insurance companies are not doing it. And that's why I work with financial advisors, because it's their role, in my mind, to step up.
And I can understand why the government may not be doing it necessarily. They've got a lot of competing sources for tax revenues. Insurance companies, why would insurance companies not be helping out and speaking to the long-term care issues in this country?
Mm-hmm. Well, if I owned an insurance company, I could probably give you a definitive answer. However, insurance in Canada is I think regarded as an evil that we all must cope with. You know, home insurance, car insurance, and so on.
I tend to agree. I mean, I think that my experience has been that most people view insurance as a cost only. And
That's right.
It's not a cost they enjoy paying. And even beyond that, I find that working in the financial industry, I think I've seen that there's a lot of distrust or uncertainty for a lot of people in the financial industry, and a lot of people are very reluctant when it comes to talking about insurance to their financial advisor.
They are.
Which is unfortunate. So in some cases, there are good answers that exist.
Well, one of the good answers that exists when you're talking about being proactive is that there are ways of insuring long-term care. Mm-hmm. So you can self-insure, which means you use your own assets to care. Perhaps there's support coming from your family or from some other person in your life. You may take out a reverse mortgage on your home, which allows you then to use that money to care for yourself. But there's also something that's relatively new in Canada. It's called long-term care insurance. And we call it a living benefit because it's a benefit for you when you are alive. Life insurance isn't. Life insurance kicks in after you die and to help the people who are left behind. Long-term care insurance came to Canada in the late 80s, and about 1% of Canadians own it. 99% of Canadians don't know what it is.
Wow.
And it is a product that is sold by 2 or 3 insurance companies in Canada, and it is made available to anyone who is 18 or up to 80 years of age. And what I find is that a lot of Canadians who are exposed to it think that, oh, I'm too expensive for me. You know, I'm just a middle class kind of person, and you know, I'm not earning $500,000 a year. I can't afford it. Well, that's in my mind a myth, and it's a disservice to the product, because it is a product that, when sold properly, can be customized to the needs of the individual. And how it works is that you sit down with your long-term care specialist or your financial advisor and determine what level of risk you're willing to take as an individual when it comes to your health. And you need to look at how healthy you are, your age, your family history. What did mom or dad have Alzheimer's, or you know, something that may be carried down in the family? And you decide, together with your advisor or specialist, how much money you can afford to put aside for long-term care. And so your policy is determined by how much money you think you want to access. You know, is it $1,000 a month, $2,000, $3,000? Another parameter is what kind of elimination period do you want? Because the longer the elimination period, I think the max we have right now is maybe 180 days, the lower your benefits will be.
And the elimination period is the period of time during which, if you need long-term care, you have to wait until the policy actually starts to pay out.
You are self-insuring during that point. Yeah.
Now, can I ask you, we talked a little bit about, in the second segment, about people that don't have much in the way of income or assets, and that to a certain extent the government will be there for them
Yes.
in theory. So I wanted to talk about two other different profiles, I suppose. First, we'll talk about the high net worth individual who probably has a financial advisor in a lot of cases, because that's who financial advisors are all chasing after, it seems. And then those individuals oftentimes, I would assume, are partially self-insured, or may think that they're self-insured. I've got lots of money, I'm going to be okay. If I ever get sick, I'll pay for it. Now, is that somebody that should be thinking about long-term care insurance? Is it wrong for them to simply assume they're self-insured?
Absolutely. I think a lot of financial advisors, or not a lot, I shouldn't say that, but some financial advisors think that if they've got a client with great wealth, that they don't even have to bring up the subject. And I think that does a disservice to a client, is that every client who works with a financial advisor should be introduced to long-term care insurance. And perhaps that wealthy individual wants to use the money that he would otherwise give to the government for care for other reasons, you know, to help out children, to start a foundation, many different ways that that individual can use their wealth very constructively.
So essentially, for a wealthy individual, long-term care insurance could be a way to preserve that wealth.
Absolutely.
Kind of an insurance policy on their net worth,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that it represents a fairly small portion of the population, just by virtue of their definition of the word. Most Canadians, or average Canadians,
Yeah.
I suppose, have a little bit in the way of resources, are working hard potentially to get their mortgage paid down in their 50s and sock away some money into their RSPs. Now, that person that's sort of right in the middle, they're likely not going to get all the support they potentially need from the government. They're certainly not self-insured. Is that person the perfect candidate for long-term care?
I think so. I think so, because that person is really between a rock and a hard place. And once again, the financial community cannot be afraid to bring the product up because it's too expensive. Yeah. It can be customized, because you know what? Having some coverage is better than having none at all. And I think that's a philosophy that the financial services industry needs to be governed by in order to help their clients. And the thing is that...
Or at least having the conversation, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think it's important that people are aware of the risks, aware of the options, and then they can make the choice as to whether or not it's beneficial for them. Now, I can see one of the impediments to sort of the middle class, average Canadian considering long-term care insurance is they're probably working so hard to be able to retire by the age of 62 that buying long-term care insurance could in fact ensure they have to work until they're 63. They may be adding an extra year or whatever the number is to their working years, or potentially ensuring that they've got less resources to spend in retirement if they stay healthy. If they're not healthy, it's a whole different story. And I guess that's what is the nature of long-term care insurance.
Well, I think what's also happening is that we all know that the boomer generation is moving forward, and they are aging very, very quickly. And what happens is that once an individual has had an experience with an aging parent and has perhaps been in a hospital, an acute care hospital, had a parent lying in the hall because there was no bed, had a parent in a nursing home in a ward level room, that is enough to send anybody back and say, you know what, I got to look at this. And every day more and more boomers are having this experience because their parents are of an age where they are requiring long-term care. And so it's nothing like, there's nothing like experience to push you forward to investigate something. And for those cases, I've created the long-term care readiness questionnaire. And this is something that I urge advisors to give to their boomer clients, because that, in combination with the experience of an aging parent, is very powerful to push that individual to say, you know what, I want to sit down and talk about this. Because I don't want to have happen what happened to my parents. I want to do a better job, and I don't want to be a burden for my kids.
So just to slowly wind things down a little bit here, Karen, one question that I want to ask to you, you mentioned earlier that one of the starting points for people as it relates to learning about long-term care should be contacting the CCAC in their province to get some information. What if somebody doesn't get the answers they're looking for, or they need more assistance? You're in business, obviously. How does somebody engage your services if somebody wants to work with you?
Well, they can contact me and we'll sit down or usually on the phone have a conversation about what their issues are. And sometimes it's about them, sometimes it's about a parent with dementia. And I then go into research mode, report mode, and gather what it is they need to meet their particular situation.
And you would charge a consulting fee
Yes,
for
I
that,
do.
or an hourly? Is it an hourly rate?
It's an hourly rate, a 2-hour base. Yep.
I see. Okay.
And also what I do is I encourage these people to look at another form of risk management, which is information management. There is so much information that comes tumbling at you either when you are ill or when a loved one is ill. And I've created something called the Critical Illness and Long-Term Care Planner. And whether you use my tool or another, it's a place to have everything about a person from their nickname to end-of-life wishes. So mom's in the hospital, she's unconscious. Daughter flies in from Vancouver, and the attending physician says, we don't know much about your mother. What is she allergic to? What meds is she on? Who's her family doctor?
And it's all in the planner.
Daughter doesn't know, and it's all in the planner.
And are these resources that people can buy from you or order on your website?
They're online.
Okay.
Yep.
And then beyond that, you are licensed to sell long-term care insurance as well?
Yes, I am licensed in the province of Ontario.
I see. So you can sort of do the whole gamut as it relates to long-term care. I guess just to wind up a little bit here, one thing I find as a financial planner is that a lot of people are worried about having enough in retirement. And it tends to be having enough to cover all of their expenses until they're 90 years old or whatever the case may be. People don't often plan for the worst in retirement. Most people have wills that take care of them in the event they die. A lot of people don't think about long-term care requirements. And my experience has been as it relates to insurance, and I don't sell insurance, so I tend to see what others have purchased or what others have sold. Most people have life insurance. Less people have disability insurance. Less people than that have other living benefits type products like long-term care. I think part of the reason may be that life insurance is an easier sell and is more palatable to a client, but I think that whether it's financial advisors or individuals, you need to take it upon yourself to learn about long-term care, learn about long-term care insurance. I'm not necessarily advocating long-term care insurance and saying that everyone should have it, but everyone should know about it. I wanted to thank our guest, Karen Henderson. She is the founder of the Long-Term Care Planning Network. You can check out her website for more resources. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us for this edition of the Objective Financial Hour. I'm your host, Jason Heath. Thanks very much.